Hello people of the internet, my name is Maximum Illusion and welcome back to the Warframe build guide. Today, I have finally finished him, the ultimate tank, the one true master of the infested, the so-called tectonic plate of a frame known as Nidus. I have put a lot of work into him and have finally been graced with this amazing build. Today we will be going over his abilities, the combos for his abilities, the actual build itself, as well as weapons and strategies you can use for making him into the god of the infested and a true endgame tank that he was meant to be. So, let us jump right into this by looking at his abilities. So, let's take a look first of all at his passive. And we will be demonstrating each of these abilities after I've gone through all of them and talked about what they can do. So, you can see that after I finish with this. So, first of all, we have Nidus' passive. It's what I believe makes him the ultimate tank. And what it basically does is that if you have enough stacks of mutation, when your health reaches 0, instead of dying, you will be granted invulnerability to all damage and status effects. Status effects being being knocked down, being stunned, or anything like that. You'll be granted invulnerability to those and restored to 50% health, which is pretty good. But one thing you need to note is that if you have less than 15 stacks, they will be consumed and you will still go down. So, reaching 15 stacks in a survival game, or in any game where endurance is going to be a key factor of staying alive, reaching that 15 stack mark is almost crucial as early as you can, because after that, you basically have a wall between you and death that you can rely on almost continuously and perfectly for the rest of the game. So, as far as how to get these stacks of mutation, you have multiple abilities. Specifically, the ones you want to look at are Virulence and Ravenous, as they both will give you stacks of mutation with different effects and different methods. So, Virulence is also has a secondary ability as being an energy generator, with by having energy refund on hit. It will refund a fourth of the cost of the energy spent on it. But if you hit more than 4 enemies, giving you more than 40 energy back on refund, you will actually regenerate your energy. So it is a good way of generating energy in the late game if you need it. Now, Virulence is not actually affected by cast speed, as I will demonstrate after I finish talking about the abilities. It will, after you activate it, it will extend out to its full length, and then you can recast it. So the amount of time that it takes to extend to full length is how long in between casts. So one of the things that a lot of players will do is they'll cast it at a wall. Basically, it'll shorten the actual length of the ability massively, allowing them to effectively shorten the cast time by a lot. Now, it says on the effect, for every 5 enemies hit, the infestation mutates, multiplying its destructive force. What it actually means is that for each stack of mutation you have, it multiplies the force. So each stack, so think of it as multiplying it by the amount of mutation you have. So if you have 50 mutation, you're multiplying the damage you're dealing by 50. And so at 100 stacks, which is the maximum amount you can have of mutation, granting up to 6 lives, which is amazing, you will have 20,000 damage dealt, assuming that the enemy has no damage reduction or armor of any kind. So, it's very useful for gaining stacks and getting energy. Now, let's talk about his second ability. This is another really good way of getting stacks, but for a different reason. We have Larva. Larva is a CC ability that drags every single enemy in a certain radius in towards it. And what makes it good at generating stacks? Well, you can cast it in an area, drag in all the enemies that can be drug in, right? And then cast Virulence at it, basically allowing you to hit, you know, as many enemies as you can with Virulence without having to actually hunt them down. So for 40 energy, you can hit, you know, 8, 9, 10 enemies at once. which is incredibly efficient and will get you a lot of energy and a lot of stacks very quickly. A few things to note. Once it is cast, it cannot be recast until either the duration runs out or all the enemies that are connected to it are dead or have been disconnected via whatever means. So if, for instance, if you pick up a nullifying crewman that has no shield up, and then it activates its shield while connected to Larva, Larva will not disappear, which means you cannot use your Virulence on it anymore due to the nullifying shield. So keep that in mind. Next, we have the ability that I believe most people say makes Nidus as much of a super tank as he is. It's his Parasitic Link. It has two effects. The first effect, and the most important effect, is damage reduction. When you link to an enemy, it will give you a set amount of damage reduction, capping at 90% when you have 190% power strength. Range is actually appalling. So you can also link it to an ally, and it says it gives you increased damage, but what it actually does is it actually increases your power strength instead of damage. So that's something to remember. But the ally range and the enemy range are actually different. So enemy range is half of what ally range is. So you have to keep that in mind. Alright? So you can't move that far from an enemy that you parasitically linked to. Now, there are certain enemies you don't want to link to, but at the same time there are certain enemies that you want to. So one of the things you want to do with Parasitic Link is link to enemies that have either ridiculously high amounts of health, such as Eximus units, or enemies that have high amounts of armor. Effectively, any Grineer above, say, level 75 to 80 will effectively make it last forever as long as the duration's up. Surprisingly, this actually costs stacks of mutation instead of actually using energy. So, as long as you have mutation stacks, you should be able to activate this, and you shouldn't be able to die. In theory, unless you manage to take enough damage to, get through that damage reduction, which is very unlikely in most early game content. But late game, it's almost guaranteed. So, now we get down to his fourth and final ability. This is the one that's the hardest to explain. Most people refer to it as Nidus's garden instead of Ravenous, because Ravenous just sounds strange and weird. Effectively, what Ravenous does is it spawns a small area. This area cannot be changed by range mods, so the radius of this will always be set to 8 meters. Never changes for any reason. It will give you increased regeneration on your health, and it will spawn up to 9 maggots. Now, these maggots have an interesting ability that when they burst, for whatever reason, then in a set explosion radius, which at base is 4, and that is in fact influenced by range. So high range means bigger radius. But when they explode, in a certain radius, enemies that are hit by this explosion actually give you stacks of mutation. And, well, if they're hit by Virulence, the maggots will explode. So, I think some of you can already see where this is going. One of the greatest combos for getting stacks that you can use is to cast Ravenous, cast Larva to drag all the enemies in the area in, wait for a few seconds to get a few of the maggots to connect to some of the enemies on Larva, and then cast Virulence at it. So what will happen is Virulence will hit the enemies, giving you one fifth of a mutation stack for each enemy hit, and then it will detonate each and every maggot that's in that radius, that's connected to those enemies, effectively giving you twice as many stacks for each enemy hit. Now, at the same time, if the duration on Ravenous runs out, the maggots will detonate as well. So you can effectively cast this, drag a bunch of enemies towards you if you're running low duration, and then have it detonate itself, giving you a bunch of stacks as well. But it's very cost ineffective, and it's better to keep it up all the time. So, for my build, these are the stats that we have. Radius doesn't really, range doesn't really go up by much. I don't need a lot of range. Duration doesn't change at all. Don't need duration. But as you can see, I have gotten my damage reduction, or really damage redirection, up to 90%. Damage on Virulence is up at around 400, and the length is at 23 meters. Regen per second is at 39.2. Now, let's go take a look at what these abilities look like. So first of all, we need to make sure that we have stacks. So let's take a second to get some enemies. We will have the AIs paused, of course. Alright, so, first of all, this is what Virulence looks like. So as you can see, it sends out to a certain length, and you can't really spam it that much, right? When cast at a wall, it goes a lot faster. Let's go back and grab ourselves some energy before we show off some of the other abilities. Now, here's what your larva looks like. Pulls the enemies in, and then you can cast Virulence at it. As you can see right above my energy and ability bar in the bottom right hand corner, you can see those stacks going up. We're at 5, 6, 7, and as they go up, my character changes. The character model will always change up to about 10 stacks. So here we are at 13, and as you guys can see, my character model has changed. You can go back and compare it to what it looked like before I started getting stacks, but now let's take a look at my third ability. So this is what Parasitic Link does. When active, as you can see, my character model changes again to be more infected, I guess. As you can see, a lot of my stuff has been covered in this infestation stuff, and the same goes for the enemies, so you can kind of tell who's been hit by it by that. You cannot do damage to this enemy. Now, one of the awesome things about this is that that enemy that you've connected to will actually cast Virulence with you, so you can see they cast it out as well. So it's a good way of gaining a lot of energy and a lot of stacks very quickly and easily. Now you can disable it, and any damage you've taken will actually go towards them instantly, allowing you to do a good amount of damage pretty quickly and effectively execute some enemies. Now, this is the garden. Not gonna lie, I love the animation. It looks absolutely incredible, but there's some of the maggots, as you can see, that latch on to enemies, and if we drag them all together, right, they'll all run over there. And if you hold Virulence, instead of actually pressing and releasing, you can actually see the maggots. So, if we release, see that explosion there? If you notice, my stacks are going up really quickly, and see, it's already up at 33. We'll watch them go up again. So, in just one go, we're at 33, and now we're at 43. So it effectively is giving us a massive amount of stacks really quickly. So, those are his abilities. Now, as far as builds and strategies go, well, this is after a lot of work and a lot of thought on the enemies that I'm going to be fighting and what I'm going to be up against. This is the build I came up with. I have dubbed it, I don't want to say anything, but I have dubbed it the perfect build. This is probably the best build I've ever created and ever will create for any frame ever. So, let's get rid of everything for a second. So, here's my thoughts on how I made this. So first of all, I was going to need a lot of capacity. So of course I went with Steel Charge. I could have gone with Power Donation, but of course losing ability strength would not do well for this character. Mainly because you need to be at 190% ability strength in order to get the maximum damage reduction from your Parasitic Link. So, can't use Power Donation. After that, I needed to get myself up to the needed 190%. So, I figured I would go with my Power Drift to get myself a little extra. And then I'll go with these. Now, the added benefit of going with Umbral Intensify and the Umbral mods in general is that I gain massive amounts of armor and health, and I get up to that 190%. Admittedly, they take a massive amount of cost. 16 per each one. I only have 25 left, so not a lot to work with, alright? But, of course, it all works out in the end. So, after that, in order to give myself a little bit of a wall in between me and messing up, because I know that that one of the problems I would have with this character is that when facing Just Infested, I would have my energy drained too fast for me to be able to recast my abilities, and so a single mess up could mean no energy and therefore no way of regenerating my stacks, and I can't have that. So even though the wiki actually says that you shouldn't be running it and that it's not recommended, I actually run it because more energy gives me more of a wall in between me and, well, death. Now, on top of that, in order to get myself more range for my Parasitic Link, and for my Larva, I'll put on a Stretch. Now, admittedly this makes my Virulence go out longer, meaning it takes longer to recast, but it's worth it. Truly worth it to run. So, now, for Madurai, we're going to run Rage. Now, you could run Hunter Adrenaline if you don't have some of these mods maxed out, but I'd run Rage because I have them maxed out, and that one extra capacity, just, it helps a lot. So, keep that in mind. After that, we need to run our Gladiator Resolve. Why? Because it helps. So, with Gladiator Resolve, we reach 1,875 health. And, well, it also gives us increased crit chance per combo multiplier as a bonus, because, you know, of course. And here is the big mod. Adaptation. It's the only mod that I don't have maxed out, mainly because you don't need to. Because, for those of you who don't know how adaptation works, the stacks up to 90% is permanent on every single version of the mod. All that changes is how long that damage reduction lasts and how fast it stacks up. And I figure at rank 8, which is what I have it on right now, I gain enough damage reduction and enough time to not want to go to those last two ranks. And then there's also the fact that I've run out of capacity. And so I actually had to get a new adaptation mod because my other one was on rank 9 and I couldn't max out my Umbral Intensify. Even though I didn't really need to, I wanted to do it so I could use it with other builds. Now, for Arcanes, the one Arcane that you're almost guaranteed to have is Arcane Grace. As you can see, it gives you a 6% chance for plus 4% health regeneration per second for 6 seconds when you're damaged. The reason you want to have that one, because with how much health we have, that's around, I think it's around 40 or, I think it's around like 20 or 30 health. Or it's probably more like 70 health per second. And combined with your extra, so you gain plus the 15% heal rate, it's really useful. Now, when it says 15% heal rate, it actually means 15 health per second. But, you know, whatever. Now, the second one is more a matter of what you want and what you want to use. If you think your damage is going to be fine, I recommend using Arcane Guardian for the extra armor. Personally, I use Arcane Fury for the extra damage on critical hit because I always land crits, and you'll see why when I get there. But that's the build for you. Now, there are some other builds you can look at. This build also works well with massive amounts of range and duration. Granted, you'll have to lose a bit of health and you'll lose your adaptation, but by changing that out a little, you can, well, you can become a bit more ability based instead of just face tanking. Now, the bane of this character's existence, Nullifiers. They will ruin your day. They can get rid of your garden. They can stop you from being able to use your Virulence and your Parasitic Link, and effectively just stop you from being a tank in general. They also have the added effect of stripping your mutation stacks by 1 per second that you're in their field. So, in order to get rid of them, I run Neutralizing Justice, which has a 90% chance to immediately destroy a nullifying field every time you shoot it. Now, in order to get myself to maximum Bane of Nullifier status, I run Vigilante Armament for 60% multi-shot, as well as Split Chamber for 90% multi-shot, giving me a total of 2 guaranteed shots every time I pull that trigger, making that 90% up to 180% chance. Guaranteed to strip a nully field every time I shoot it. Everything else I ran was for magazine capacity, ammo maximum, and reload speed. I put absolutely no forma on this at all. This is just base stuff. Most of it's pretty easy to get a hold of, and you should probably have it anyways. But yeah. Now, for a weapon, you want something that can maintain into the extreme late game. And I mean extreme late game if you want to see what this character can truly do. So, I run my Atarax. Now, of course I'm running Maiming Strike build because that is the best build to run. By far the best build to run. That along with Drifting Contact, Blood Rush, and everything else I have on here. We have an amazing build. It does incredible damage against armored and unarmored alike. It is just by far my favorite weapon to date right now. Good alternatives are the Galatine and Galatine Prime, running the exact same builds. And then, now, your companion doesn't really matter. I recommend running the Jin, mainly because it gives you Medi-Ray, which is an extra health per second, and you can use Animal Instinct for enemy radar. On top of that, with Reawaken, you don't have to worry about it dying. And so late game enemies that will one-shot literally anything but you don't really matter anymore because it automatically revives itself. It's also useful because you have Vacuum, which is very, very nice. Now, as far as gear goes, I would recommend just running everything. Secondaries don't matter. Sentinel weapon really doesn't matter. So let's show what some of these abilities actually look like. So let's simulate this again. So first of all, I'm going to get my stacks up. Pull everything over here. One thing to note, when casting your Virulence, your character actually moves forward a little if you look down. You'll notice he moves forward a little every time. So that can get kind of annoying if you don't know about it. Alright. Now we'll cast our 4th. So that should be enough to really show what this character can do. So let's head over here. a good way to reset your stacks if you're constantly going up and you've gotten a lot more stacks than your character can actually show with how fast it's going up. Doing that will fully reset it. So as you can see, I'm all the way up to 99. Didn't take too long, but let's kill these guys, unpause them, and then simulate. So these are level 100 bombards without me doing anything. Barely doing any damage at all. So let's make it a little harder. There we go. Had a bit of lag there, don't know why. But so this is me linked to an enemy. And now we have Ravenous. As you can see, my health is barely even moving. I'm saying maybe 1 or 2 frames at max. And this is when I'm not doing anything at all to try and stay alive. So as you can see, my Jin is already dead, but at this point I would kind of expect that. It's just to be expected. And yeah, there's the build for you. As you can see, I can execute that enemy to do a massive amount of damage based off of how much I've actually taken. Now, one of the things to notice is that when taking this, your main form of damage reduction is actually going to come from adaptation and not your Parasitic Link. Mainly because with the adaptation, as you can see, I'm now at 90%. I'm taking barely enough for it to actually stop me, and then as soon as Arcane Grace procs, I'm back up to max health, right there. And that's against level 100 with me completely AFK, not doing anything. Now, as far as things you can do to change this build a little, personally, I wouldn't say there is anything that you should do, but you can actually drop the flow and put on something like, I don't know, Augur Message for more duration, stuff like that. I personally don't need duration. I find my duration is perfectly fine as is, but, you know, it comes down to you. So, if you guys enjoyed this build video, please like, comment, subscribe. If there's any changes that you think I should make, I will take a look at them if you just tell me in the comments below. I'm sorry for how I sounded in this video. I know I've been coughing a lot. I'm actually a little sick right now, and I hope I will get better soon so I can continue doing these videos. And I will see you all in my next revamped build guide. I will be doing my Valkyr.